21 beloved black stars we lost to AIDS. They were celebrated, admired, and placed on pedestals by the world, until silence replaced applause. These were not just entertainers, athletes, or artists. They were legends. Yet when AIDS entered their lives, many were pushed into the shadows, abandoned by industries that once profited from their brilliance. This is not a story meant to shock for attention. It is meant to challenge comfort. How does society treat black excellence when fame fades and illness arrives? Stay with us because these stories demand to be heard. Subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. This is Black Excellence Legends, where forgotten voices reclaim their place in history. Arthur Ashe. Arthur Ashe was never defined solely by trophies. He was a man who changed the meaning of victory itself. In 1975, Ashe made history as the first black man to win Wimbledon, defeating Jimmy Connors in a match that reshaped tennis forever. At a time when professional sports were still deeply entangled with racial barriers, his triumph resonated far beyond center court. It was not just a win, it was a statement. Off the court, Ashe carried himself with intellect and restraint. A graduate of UCLA, a writer, and a lifelong advocate for civil rights, he spoke out against apartheid in South Africa and worked tirelessly to expand access to education and healthcare. His influence extended into policy, activism, and global humanitarian work, long after the applause faded. In 1983, during heart bypass surgery, Ashe received a blood transfusion that unknowingly exposed him to HIV, years before routine blood screening became standard in the United States. He kept his diagnosis private for nearly a decade, not out of shame, but to protect his family from public scrutiny during a period when AIDS was surrounded by fear and misinformation. In April 1992, after media pressure threatened to reveal the truth, Ashe chose transparency. He publicly disclosed his HIV status and immediately transformed personal tragedy into purpose. He founded the Arthur Ashe Foundation for the Defeat of AIDS and became one of the most respected voices advocating for compassion, science-based education, and dignity for people living with the disease. Arthur Ashe passed away on February 6, 1993, at the age of 49. Yet his legacy did not end in a hospital room. It lives on in every athlete who understands that greatness includes responsibility, courage, and humanity. Ashe proved that even in silence, integrity can speak louder than any roar of a crowd. Alvin Ailey. Alvin Ailey reshaped the world of modern dance by placing black stories, black bodies, and black spirituality at its very center. Born in Texas during the era of segregation, Ailey carried the memory of hardship into movement, transforming lived experience into choreography that spoke across cultures. In 1958, he founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, a company that would become one of the most influential dance institutions in history. His masterpiece, Revelations, first performed in 1960, drew directly from African-American spirituals and gospel traditions. It became more than a performance, it was a cultural testimony. Decades later, it remains one of the most frequently performed modern dance works in the world, seen by millions across 6 continents. Despite his public success, Ailey lived a deeply private life. At a time when homosexuality carried severe social and professional consequences, he guarded his personal identity carefully. In the late 1980s, as the AIDS epidemic devastated the arts community, Ailey's health declined rapidly. He was hospitalized in New York and fell into a coma as complications overwhelmed his immune system. Alvin Ailey died on December 1, 1989, at the age of 58. At his request, leukemia, not AIDS, was listed as the cause of death, reflecting the intense stigma surrounding the disease at the time. This decision was not about denial, but about protecting the company he built and the dancers whose livelihoods depended on it. Today, Ailey's legacy is unmistakable. His company continues to train generations of performers, While his choreography stands as proof that dance can preserve memory, confront injustice, and affirm identity. Alvin Ailey did not simply create art, he created space, ensuring that Black expression would never again be pushed to the margins. Fela Anikulapo Kuti. Fela Anikulapo Kuti was never just a musician. He was a movement. As the creator of Afrobeat, Fela fused West African rhythms with jazz, funk, and sharp political commentary, crafting a sound that challenged authority and demanded accountability. From the streets of Lagos to international stages, his music became a weapon against corruption, colonial influence, and military oppression in Nigeria. Fela lived exactly as he performed, boldly, defiantly, and without restraint. He openly confronted governments, endured repeated arrests, and survived violent raids on his commune, the Calcutta Republic. His lifestyle was equally uncompromising, rejecting conventional norms and embracing radical personal freedom, even when it invited controversy. By the mid-1990s, Fela's health deteriorated. He resisted Western medical treatment, placing his trust instead in traditional remedies and spiritual belief. As his immune system weakened, infections overtook his body, leaving him increasingly isolated from the world he once electrified. Fela Anikulapo Kuti died on August 2, 1997, at the age of 58. His family initially avoided publicly naming AIDS as the cause of death, reflecting the cultural silence and stigma surrounding the illness in Nigeria at the time. Yet the truth later became part of his story, one shaped not by fear, but by the consequences of a life lived on his own terms. Even in death, Fela's influence did not fade. Afrobeat continues to inspire artists worldwide, from political activists to global pop stars. His music remains a reminder that art can confront power directly, and that resistance, once ignited, cannot be silenced. Max Robinson. Max Robinson made history simply by showing up on screen. In 1978, he became the first Black man to co-anchor a national nightly news broadcast in the United States, joining ABC News at a time when American media remained overwhelmingly white. His calm delivery, analytical clarity, and journalistic discipline challenged long-standing stereotypes and expanded what authority looked like on television. Robinson was more than a symbol. He was a trained reporter who demanded accuracy and depth, often pushing his network to address racial inequality and urban issues with seriousness rather than spectacle. For millions of viewers, his presence alone carried meaning, proof that Black professionals could occupy spaces long denied to them. Yet behind the polished broadcasts, Robinson lived with profound isolation. During the 1980s, as HIV spread through communities already burdened by stigma, he contracted the virus through intimate relationships. At a time when AIDS was widely misunderstood and often framed as moral failure, Robinson chose privacy. His illness remained largely unknown to the public, even as his health quietly deteriorated. In late 1988, complications from AIDS-related pneumonia led to his hospitalization in Washington, D.C. On December 20, 1988, Max Robinson died at the age of 49. Only after his death did the truth become widely known, sparking conversations about AIDS that crossed racial, professional, and social boundaries. Robinson's legacy is not confined to how he died, but to how he lived, breaking barriers without spectacle, carrying responsibility without complaint. He opened doors for generations of Black journalists who followed, proving that representation is not merely visibility, but permanence. His silence was imposed by an era. His impact endures far beyond it. Sylvester. Sylvester James Jr. embodied liberation long before it was widely accepted. Rising to fame in the 1970s disco era, he became a radiant force whose falsetto voice and unapologetic presence challenged rigid norms of gender, sexuality, and performance. His breakthrough hit, "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real," was not just a dance anthem, It was a declaration of selfhood. At a time when mainstream audiences rarely embraced openly gender non-conforming artists, Sylvester refused to compromise. His flamboyant style and emotional vulnerability made him a beacon for LGBTQ+ communities seeking visibility and joy. On stage, he celebrated authenticity. Off stage, he built chosen families where acceptance thrived. As the AIDS epidemic emerged in the early 1980s, San Francisco became one of its epicenters. Sylvester was diagnosed with HIV in 1986. Rather than retreat, he continued to record and perform, channeling urgency into his final work. His last album, Immortal, was recorded while his health was rapidly declining, infused with both hope and farewell. In 1988, as complications intensified, Sylvester declined prolonged hospitalization, choosing instead to remain in his apartment surrounded by close friends. On December 16, 1988, he died at the age of 41. His family distanced themselves, but his community stepped forward, organizing celebrations of life rather than funerals, honoring the joy he gave the world. Sylvester's voice did not vanish with him. It remains embedded in dance music, queer culture, and the ongoing fight for self-expression. He lived exactly as he sang, bold, unfiltered, and real, leaving behind a legacy that refuses to fade into silence. Larry Riley. Larry Riley never sought the spotlight beyond his craft. Best known for his role as Hank Adams on the long-running television series Knots Landing, Riley brought warmth and emotional depth to every scene he appeared in. His performances were grounded, unforced, and deeply human, qualities that earned him respect within the industry, even if widespread fame never fully arrived. During the 1980s, Riley continued working steadily while carrying a private struggle that few around him understood. As AIDS spread through Hollywood, fear and misinformation dominated public perception. For actors whose livelihoods depended on image and employability, disclosure often meant professional exile. Riley, like many others, chose discretion over exposure. As his health declined, complications related to HIV weakened his immune system, leaving him vulnerable to recurring infections. By the early 1990s, the disease had taken a severe toll. He was hospitalized at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where his condition worsened despite medical care. Larry Riley died on June 6, 1992, at the age of 36. His passing received little media attention, reflecting how many artists affected by AIDS were quietly lost during that era. Yet his absence was deeply felt by colleagues who knew his dedication and integrity. Riley's legacy is subtle but significant. He represents a generation of performers whose contributions were steady rather than sensational, whose lives were cut short before their full potential could unfold. His story underscores how stigma forced many to endure illness in isolation, reminding us that not every loss echoed loudly, but every loss mattered. Willie Smith. Willie Smith transformed fashion by erasing the line between streetwear and high design. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, he founded WillieWear, a brand that embraced accessibility, cultural pride, and everyday functionality. At its height, WillieWear generated tens of millions of dollars annually and was sold in major department stores worldwide, an unprecedented achievement for a Black designer at the time. Smith believed fashion should belong to everyone. His clothes were unpretentious yet bold, drawing inspiration from global travel, urban life, and working-class creativity. Long before inclusivity became an industry talking point, Smith practiced it as a principle. Behind his professional success, Smith lived freely within New York's artistic and social circles. During this period, HIV circulated silently, years before effective treatments existed. By the mid-1980s, Smith's health declined rapidly as AIDS-related complications set in. In April 1987, he was hospitalized at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York, suffering from severe pneumonia, a common and often fatal condition for people with advanced AIDS at the time. On April 17, 1987, Willie Smith died at the age of 39. His death sent shockwaves through the fashion world. Designers, critics, and creatives mourned not only a life lost, but a future abruptly erased. Yet Smith's influence endured. He paved the way for generations of Black designers by proving that commercial success and cultural authenticity could coexist. Willie Smith did not merely design clothing, he reshaped the industry's imagination, leaving a legacy stitched into modern fashion itself. Michael Peters. Michael Peters was the unseen force behind some of the most recognizable images in modern music history. As a choreographer and dancer, he helped redefine how movement could tell a story on screen. His most famous contribution, co-creating the choreography for Michael Jackson's Thriller, did more than complement a song. It reshaped the language of music videos and elevated dance to cinematic spectacle. Trained in both classical and contemporary styles, Peters approached choreography with precision and narrative intent. His work emphasized character, tension, and rhythm, allowing performers to communicate emotion through motion rather than excess. Throughout the 1980s, his influence spread across film, television, and live performance, shaping an era when dance became inseparable from pop identity. Behind the acclaim, Peters lived in an industry that offered little protection for those facing serious illness. During a time when HIV carried immense stigma, he kept his diagnosis private while continuing to work as long as his health allowed. As the disease progressed, complications weakened his body, eventually limiting the physical expression that had defined his life. Michael Peters died on August 29, 1994, at the age of 46. His passing came quietly, without the public acknowledgement his contributions deserved. Yet his legacy never vanished. Every tightly synchronized routine, every narrative-driven performance carries echoes of his vision. Peters proved that choreography could shape culture as powerfully as melody or lyric. Though his name may not always be spoken first, his imprint remains permanent, embedded in the movements that continue to define popular music worldwide. Howard Rollins Jr. Howard Rollins Jr. possessed a rare intensity that set him apart from his peers. His breakthrough performance in Ragtime earned him an Academy Award nomination, marking him as one of the most promising actors of his generation. On screen and stage, Rollins conveyed vulnerability and strength with equal force, drawing audiences into characters shaped by complexity rather than convention. Despite early success, his career became increasingly unstable. Personal struggles, including battles with addiction, interfered with consistent work, even as his talent remained undeniable. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, as AIDS spread through artistic communities, Rollins faced declining health in an environment where support was limited and disclosure often dangerous. As his immune system weakened, opportunistic infections took hold. Hospitalizations became more frequent, and opportunities diminished. By the mid-1990s, he had largely disappeared from public view, his earlier achievements overshadowed by silence rather than scandal. Howard Rollins Jr. died on December 8, 1996, at the age of 50 due to complications related to AIDS. His death received little attention, a stark contrast to the acclaim that once surrounded him. Yet the absence of headlines does not diminish the significance of his work. Rollins represents a generation of artists whose potential was interrupted by illness and stigma rather than lack of ability. His performances remain a testament to what was possible, and a reminder of how many voices were lost before they could fully be heard. Glenn Burke. During the 1980s, he contracted HIV as the epidemic ravaged marginalized communities with little public empathy or institutional response. As his health declined, Burke moved in with his sister in California. Complications from AIDS weakened him steadily, culminating in severe pneumonia. On May 30, 1995, Glenn Burke died at the age of 42. Today, Burke's story stands as both inspiration and indictment. He is remembered not only for his athletic talent, but for the price he paid for honesty. In recent years, baseball has begun to acknowledge his legacy, recognizing that the game's history includes voices it once silenced. Glenn Burke did not receive justice in his lifetime, but his courage changed the conversation forever. Ricky Wilson. Ricky Wilson was the creative backbone of the B-52s, a guitarist whose unconventional style helped define the band's unmistakable sound. Eschewing traditional solos, Wilson favored sharp, percussive riffs and surf-influenced textures that gave songs like Rock Lobster and Planet Claire their restless energy. His approach was instinctive rather than technical, proving that innovation often comes from breaking rules. As the band rose to international fame in the early 1980s, Wilson remained intensely private. While his music radiated joy and eccentricity, he guarded his personal life closely. During this period, HIV was poorly understood, widely feared, and deeply stigmatized. Wilson was diagnosed but chose not to share his illness publicly or even fully with his bandmates. By 1985, his health deteriorated rapidly. Hospitalized at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, Wilson became increasingly weak, unable to play the instrument that had defined his identity. On October 12, 1985, he died at the age of 32 from AIDS-related complications. Initially, the cause of death was not publicly discussed, reflecting the silence that surrounded the disease at the time. Only later did the truth emerge, reshaping how fans understood both his absence and the era itself. Ricky Wilson's influence never disappeared. His sound continues to resonate through alternative and new wave music, inspiring artists who value originality over convention. Though his life was brief, his contribution was lasting, proof that even the quietest figures can leave the deepest marks on culture. Kevin Peter Hall. Kevin Peter Hall was a performer whose impact was felt even when his face was unseen. Standing at 7 feet 2 inches, he possessed a rare physical presence that made him indispensable to Hollywood at a time when practical effects relied on human performance rather than digital illusion. Hall is best remembered for portraying the extraterrestrial hunter in Predator 1987 and Predator 2 1990, bringing intelligence and nuance to a character designed to intimidate. Unlike many actors of his stature, Hall was also classically trained and deeply thoughtful about performance. He approached creature roles not as spectacle, but as acting challenges, using posture, timing, and restraint to give non-human characters emotional weight. His work set a standard for physical acting that continues to influence the genre. In 1990, Hall was involved in a serious car accident that required emergency surgery. During treatment, he received a blood transfusion, later believed to be the source of his HIV infection, at a time when screening procedures were still imperfect. His health declined rapidly as AIDS-related complications developed. Kevin Peter Hall died on April 10, 1991, at the age of 35. His death stunned colleagues who recognized both his talent and his kindness. Tributes described him as gentle, humorous, and generous, qualities that contrasted sharply with the fearsome figures he portrayed on screen. Though his life was brief, Hall's legacy endures in the art of physical performance. He proved that even the most imposing characters require humanity at their core. Behind the mask, Kevin Peter Hall gave monsters a soul and left behind a standard of excellence that still towers over the genre. Roy Simmons. Roy Simmons once stood among the elite. Drafted into the National Football League in 1979, he played as a defensive lineman for teams including the New York Giants and Washington Redskins, and appeared in Super Bowl 18. Powerful and disciplined, Simmons embodied the image of professional football success during an era defined by toughness and conformity. In 1992, Simmons made a decision that would change his life forever. He publicly came out as gay. At the time, the NFL had no framework for acceptance. The reaction was swift and unforgiving. Opportunities vanished, support systems collapsed, and the league he had given his body to offered little protection once he no longer fit its image. Cut off from professional football, Simmons struggled with substance abuse and financial instability. During this period, he contracted HIV, joining countless others affected by the epidemic who lacked adequate medical care or social support. As the years passed, AIDS-related complications eroded his health, leaving him increasingly isolated. Roy Simmons died on February 20th, 2014, at the age of 57, alone in his Bronx apartment. His passing drew renewed attention to the costs faced by athletes who dared to live openly before institutions were ready to change. Today, Simmons is remembered not just as a football player, but as a figure of painful honesty. His story exposes how silence and stigma can be as destructive as illness itself. In speaking his truth, Roy Simmons challenged a culture that was not prepared to listen. But history is listening now. Jermaine Stewart. Jermaine Stewart burst onto the music scene in the mid-1980s with an energy that felt effortless and contagious. His breakout hit, "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off," climbed the charts in 1986, offering a playful, upbeat alternative to the increasingly explicit pop trends of the era. With its infectious melody and universal appeal, the song made Stewart an international name almost overnight. Behind the cheerful sound, however, Stewart struggled to maintain his place in a fast-moving industry. Changing musical tastes and record label pressures gradually pushed him away from the mainstream. As the spotlight dimmed, he retreated from public life, choosing privacy over constant reinvention. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, Stewart contracted HIV. At a time when the disease carried severe stigma, particularly for Black male artists, he kept his condition hidden from the public. Rather than seeking attention or sympathy, he withdrew quietly, living his final years away from the industry that had once embraced him. As AIDS-related complications worsened, Stewart's health declined dramatically. Liver failure and physical weakness confined him to his home in Illinois, where daily life became increasingly difficult. On March 17, 1997, Jermaine Stewart died at the age of 39. Though his career was brief, Stewart's impact endured. His music continues to circulate through radio, film, and popular culture, often rediscovered by new generations. Jermaine Stewart is remembered not only for a hit song, but for a moment of joy he shared with the world, a reminder that even fleeting voices can leave lasting echoes. Essex Hemphill. Essex Hemphill did not seek mainstream approval. He wrote for survival, for truth, and for those whose lives were rarely reflected in literature. Emerging from Washington, D.C.'s Black gay arts movement in the 1980s, Hemphill used poetry to confront racism, homophobia, and invisibility with unapologetic clarity. His words were sharp, political, and deeply personal. Through collections such as Ceremonies and Conditions, Hemphill challenged readers to confront the realities faced by Black LGBTQ+ communities. His work rejected respectability and demanded space, insisting that love, anger, grief, and desire all deserve to be spoken aloud. In an era defined by silence around AIDS, his voice cut through denial and fear. Hemphill was diagnosed with HIV in the late 1980s. Even as his health declined, he continued writing and performing, refusing to disappear quietly. His poetry addressed illness not as tragedy alone, but as a social failure shaped by neglect and stigma. As complications progressed, Hemphill's world narrowed. Support faded, and isolation became a constant presence. On November 4th, 1995, he died in Philadelphia at the age of 38. Essex Hemphill's legacy lives in language. His work remains foundational in Black queer literature, studied, quoted, and performed decades later. He proved that poetry could function as protest, remembrance, and survival all at once. Though his life was short, his words continue to speak, unwilling to be erased, impossible to ignore. Tony Fields. Tony Fields was a performer whose body spoke before words ever could. Trained in dance from an early age, he moved effortlessly between Broadway, film, and television, bringing athletic precision and emotional clarity to every role. Audiences remember him for performances in productions like A Chorus Line and films such as Fame and The Last Dragon, where his presence elevated ensemble scenes into moments of kinetic storytelling. Fields belonged to a generation of dancers who helped translate stage movement into cinematic language. His style balanced discipline with instinct, allowing choreography to feel alive rather than rehearsed. In an industry that often demanded constant visibility, he worked steadily while maintaining a relatively private life. During the late 1980s, as AIDS continued to devastate the performing arts community, Fields contracted HIV. Like many artists of the era, he faced an environment where disclosure risked professional isolation. As treatments were limited, complications advanced quickly, weakening the very body that had defined his career. By the mid-1990s, Fields' health had deteriorated significantly. Hospitalized in California, he faced the disease away from the applause that once surrounded him. Tony Fields died on February 27, 1995, at the age of 36. His death marked the loss of a performer whose potential extended far beyond the roles he left behind. Yet his influence persists in the evolution of dance, on screen and stage. Tony Fields demonstrated that movement could carry narrative weight, emotion, and identity. Proof that even when the spotlight fades, true artistry continues to resonate. Allen Wiggins. Allen Wiggins entered Major League Baseball as a force built for momentum. Known for his speed and intensity, he played as a second baseman and outfielder for teams including the San Diego Padres and Baltimore Orioles. In the early 1980s, Wiggins' athleticism made him a valuable asset, capable of shifting the tempo of a game in moments. Yet talent alone could not shield him from personal struggles. Substance abuse issues disrupted his career, leading to suspensions and instability that gradually overshadowed his performance. As opportunities narrowed, Wiggins drifted away from the professional structure that had once anchored his life. During this period, he contracted HIV at a time when public understanding of the disease remained limited and heavily stigmatized. Without consistent medical care or institutional support, his health declined rapidly. AIDS-related complications, including pneumonia, further weakened him as his circumstances became increasingly precarious. Allen Wiggins died on June 1, 1991, at the age of 32. His passing received little attention compared to the promise he once represented, reflecting how easily athletes could be forgotten once they fell outside the spotlight. Wiggins' story is a reminder that professional success does not guarantee protection from vulnerability. His career, though brief, revealed both the heights of athletic potential and the cost of neglect when support systems fail. In remembering Allen Wiggins, we confront the human realities behind statistics and the lives lost too soon during a devastating era. Stony Jackson. Stony Jackson was once a recognizable presence on American television. Appearing in popular series throughout the 1980s, he embodied the promise of a rising actor navigating an industry that was slowly expanding opportunities for Black performers. His roles were often understated but memorable, marked by sincerity rather than spectacle. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Jackson never became a headline-driven star. He worked consistently, building a career defined by reliability and quiet professionalism. Yet as the television landscape shifted and roles became scarce, his visibility diminished. At the same time, a far more devastating force entered his life. During the height of the AIDS epidemic, Jackson contracted HIV. In an era when the disease was still surrounded by fear and misinformation, especially within the entertainment industry, disclosure carried heavy consequences. Jackson retreated from public view as his health declined. receiving little media attention as he struggled privately. By the mid-1990s, complications had severely weakened him. Hospitalized in Los Angeles, Jackson spent his final days largely alone, disconnected from the industry that had once relied on his talent. On October 20th, 1995, Stony Jackson died at the age of 35. His passing went largely unnoticed, highlighting how many working actors were lost during that period without acknowledgement or remembrance. Stony Jackson's story reflects a broader truth of the AIDS crisis. Not every life lost belonged to a superstar, but every loss represented unrealized potential. Remembering him restores dignity to a name nearly erased by silence. John Anthony Ray. John Anthony Ray emerged as a gifted performer whose talent radiated intensity and movement. Best known for his role in the film Fame, 1980, Ray brought raw energy and emotional honesty to the screen, capturing the hunger and vulnerability of young artists chasing their dreams. His performance resonated with audiences who saw in him both ambition and fragility. Despite early acclaim, Ray's career struggled to find stability. Substance abuse and mental health challenges complicated his professional path, gradually distancing him from the momentum he once possessed. As opportunities dwindled, his life became increasingly unstable, reflecting the harsh reality faced by many young performers unprepared for sudden fame. During the late 1980s, Ray contracted HIV. Without consistent access to care or support, his condition worsened over time. In the years that followed, he lived in relative obscurity, separated from the industry that had once celebrated him. His health deteriorated further after suffering a stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed and dependent on medical assistance. John Anthony Ray died on November 14, 2003, at the age of 41. His death marked the quiet end of a career that had once promised longevity and influence. Ray's legacy endures through the authenticity he brought to his work. His story serves as a reminder of how talent alone cannot protect against systemic neglect, illness, and isolation. In remembering John Anthony Ray, we honor not just what he achieved, but what he never had the chance to become. Eazy-E. Eazy-E, born Eric Lynn Wright, was one of the most influential architects of West Coast hip-hop. As a founding member of NWA, he helped bring the realities of inner-city Los Angeles into mainstream music, reshaping the sound, language, and attitude of rap in the late 1980s. His voice carried authority not because it was polished, but because it was raw, direct, and unapologetic. Beyond performing, Eazy-E was a strategist. Through Ruthless Records, he launched careers that would define hip-hop for decades, proving that independent Black ownership could rival major labels. His success symbolized a new kind of power, cultural, economic, and uncompromising. In early 1995, Eazy-E was hospitalized with severe respiratory distress. On March 16th, he publicly announced that he had been diagnosed with AIDS, a revelation that shocked fans and peers alike. Unlike many figures before him, he did not retreat into silence. Instead, he used his final days to warn others about the realities of HIV, urging awareness and responsibility. Just 10 days later, on March 26, 1995, Eazy-E died at the age of 30. His rapid decline underscored how advanced the disease was by the time of diagnosis, and how little margin for intervention remained. Eazy-E's legacy remains complex, but undeniable. His music continues to influence generations, while his final message added a human dimension to a genre often defined by bravado. In confronting AIDS publicly, even briefly, he forced conversations that extended beyond music, reminding the world that vulnerability exists even at the height of power. These lives force an uncomfortable question. Were they lost only to disease, or also to stigma, silence, and neglect? If medicine had arrived sooner, if compassion had been louder, if truth had not been punished, how many of these legends would still be here today? Their talent was undeniable, But was their humanity fully protected? We want to hear from you. Do you believe society has truly learned from this era, or are we repeating the same mistakes in new forms? Leave your thoughts in the comments and join the conversation. Follow Black Excellence Legends, where legacy never dies in silence.